Doctors told a billionaire his only son had just 9 days left to live. No hope, no options, just a countdown to goodbye. But then, when everyone had given up, the family's longtime maid, the woman who had quietly cared for the boy like he was her own, made a bold, unthinkable decision that no one saw coming. What she did next didn't just shock the entire medical team. It changed the boy's life forever and left his father in tears. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. When Leo was just 6 years old, everything in our lives changed. We had just come back from a family trip, and he had been complaining about pain in his legs. At first, we thought it was nothing serious, maybe growing pains or something like that. But then he started feeling tired all the time, and bruises showed up out of nowhere. We took him to the doctor, then another, and then another. After a bunch of tests, I sat in a cold hospital room with a doctor telling me my son had a rare and aggressive form of cancer. It felt like the floor dropped beneath me. They said it was one of those cases that barely had any studies or research behind it. I couldn't even process it at first. Leo was just six. He didn't even know what was happening exactly, just that he had to go to the hospital a lot. From that day forward, everything else stopped. My world became all about trying to save him. We jumped straight into treatment. At first, it was chemotherapy. I remember holding his hand while he threw up, weak and pale, asking if he'd be better soon. He never complained, not once. I did. Inside, I did nothing but complain to the world. After chemo didn't show the results we hoped for, they switched him to immunotherapy. That didn't work either. Then we tried clinical trials, hoping we'd find a miracle. I spent endless nights researching, calling doctors in different countries, and reading medical papers I barely understood. We even flew out to see specialists. Everyone was kind, but the answer was always the same. We're sorry, but the cancer is resistant. There's nothing else we can do. When they finally told me Leo had 3 months left, I couldn't breathe. How do you accept that? How do you look at your child and think, you're leaving soon? But I had to stay strong, for him. Once the treatment stopped, we stayed in the hospital for most of the time. I set up camp in his room. I brought in his favorite toys, books, and even his dog visited a few times. Leo loved stories, so every day I told him something new. Sometimes I made them up, sometimes I just retold his favorite ones. He'd listen quietly, eyes wide open, asking questions and smiling. He still smiled, even when the pain got worse. He stayed calm in a way I didn't expect. He wasn't scared like I was. The nurses adored him. They'd say things like, "He's so brave," and I'd nod, trying not to cry. I'd watch him sleep and wonder how he could be so peaceful. I wished I could take the disease away and give it to myself instead. I would have done anything. But all I could do was be there, every second, holding his hand, making him feel loved and safe. Home didn't feel like home anymore. It had become part hospital, part shelter. Nurses were always around, caregivers, oxygen machines, meds on the kitchen table. I tried to keep it quiet and cozy for Leo, but the vibe had changed. There were no more rushed mornings or school runs. His room smelled like disinfectant, and the soft beeping from machines was constant. I hated that sound. It was like a reminder of the ticking clock. I missed hearing his laughter echo through the house, and I missed his mom. She passed away years ago, and now that I was facing the possibility of losing Leo, I felt the pain of her absence more than ever. I felt alone, even surrounded by people. Some nights, after he fell asleep, I sat on the couch, just staring at nothing, completely numb. But I couldn't fall apart. I had to smile for Leo, tell him he'd be okay, even if I wasn't sure myself. Leo never asked me if he was going to die, but he must have known. Kids are more aware than we think. Sometimes he'd say things like, "If I go somewhere, will you come with me?" And I'd choke up, unsure how to respond. I told him I'd always be close. We talked about everything except the obvious. It was unspoken but present in every conversation. I think he just wanted things to stay normal, at least on the surface. So we played games, watched cartoons, laughed at silly jokes. There were moments of joy mixed in with the fear and sadness. He stayed resilient, stronger than I ever expected. Every time he smiled, I wondered how he did it. How could someone so small carry so much and still smile? I tried to give him everything he wanted in those days. If he asked for something, I made it happen. He was all that mattered. Every moment felt like it could be the last. As the days passed, I started counting time differently. Not in weeks or months, but in good days and bad days. A good day was when he had enough strength to talk and laugh a little. A bad day was when he couldn't eat or barely stayed awake. Those days broke me, even if I didn't show it. I didn't want him to see me sad, but inside I was falling apart. Sometimes I'd go to the hospital bathroom just to cry alone. Then I'd come back, smiling like everything was fine. I told him more stories, held him closer, and memorized every little detail of his face. The thought of losing him haunted me, but I tried not to let it steal our moments together. I just wanted to be there, completely, for as long as he needed me. As his health kept getting worse, I stopped hoping for a cure. I just hoped he wouldn't suffer. I stayed by his side, always. One morning, out of nowhere, Leo looked at me with his usual calm face and asked, "Dad, can I have a birthday party?" I was caught off guard. I didn't even know what to say at first. We hadn't really talked about his birthday coming up. With everything going on, it just didn't feel like a time for celebration. But when he asked, he wasn't joking or playing around. He was serious, and even though he knew exactly what the doctors had said, that he might not even make it to his birthday, he still wanted a party. Not just a small one either. He wanted balloons, cake, music, his friends, the whole deal. I looked at him and I couldn't say no. I just smiled and said, "Of course you can." That moment changed something. It wasn't just a party anymore. It became this light in the middle of everything we were dealing with. Leo looked happy just imagining it, and that was enough for me. The same day, I started making calls. I spoke to the hospital staff first. They were amazing about it. The nurses were already tossing around ideas by the time I hung up the phone. I also contacted his school, and the principal didn't even hesitate. "Tell us what you need," she said. Everyone wanted to help. I sat down with Leo, and we talked about the theme. He didn't even need time to think. "Superheroes," he said, grinning. "Red and blue like Spider-Man and Superman." He was so into it. He even picked the playlist. He wanted music from his favorite cartoons and video games. I couldn't believe how excited he was. For a moment, I forgot about his condition and just got carried away with the planning. There were going to be cupcakes, banners, balloons, little capes for everyone. It was turning into a real party. It gave me something to focus on, something that wasn't medicine or bad news. For once, we were planning something happy. The following days were actually full of laughter. Leo spent hours talking about which kind of cake he wanted. First he said chocolate, then strawberry, then both. "Maybe a half and half cake," he said, nodding like he was making a big executive decision. He also talked about games they could play, even though we all knew he didn't have the strength to run around. That didn't matter to him. He just liked the idea of everyone being there. He even chose the t-shirt he wanted to wear, a red one with a big lightning bolt on it. It was too big, but he didn't care. Amara, our housekeeper, who's basically family, got super involved too. She helped decorate his room with drawings and helped me with a checklist. She was always humming while taping things to the wall. The hospital room started looking less like a room and more like a small party hall. Everyone around us was doing their best to make Leo's day special. Leo's face every morning was different. There was this excitement in his eyes, even when he was too tired to talk much. The nurses would stop by and show him pictures of the decorations being prepared. One even brought samples of frosting for him to taste. I hadn't seen him like that in weeks. He was already weak, but this idea of having a party gave him a burst of something new. He spent a lot of time just talking to me about who he thought would come, what they would say, and what kind of gifts they might bring. He didn't even care if there were presents or not. He just wanted people around. The doctors were cautious, making sure the environment would be safe for him, but even they admitted the excitement was helping. It was like the party became a part of his treatment. A different kind, one that didn't come from machines or pills, but from joy and being a kid again, even if just for a day. Meanwhile, I was watching all this with a strange mix of feelings. On one hand, I was happy. Seeing him like that, talkative, smiling, hopeful, made everything feel a little lighter. On the other hand, there was this heavy sadness sitting on my chest the whole time. I didn't let it show, but it was there. Every balloon I ordered, every song we picked out, I kept thinking, what if this is the last party? What if this is the last time I see him surrounded by friends laughing? I kept those thoughts to myself, but they came up when I was alone. At night, I'd sit in the chair next to his bed and just watch him sleep, wondering how he still had so much strength in that little body. I didn't want to ruin anything, so I kept smiling and pushing forward, doing my best to stay in the moment. Because that's what Leo was doing. He was living one day at a time. As the day of the party got closer, the hospital didn't feel like a hospital anymore. Staff walked around with little party hats tucked in their bags, and kids from the pediatric wing asked if they could help decorate. Amara brought in little jars filled with candy, and someone even found a way to rent a bubble machine. Leo couldn't stop talking about it, even when he was lying down with his eyes half closed from exhaustion. "Is it tomorrow yet?" he'd ask. And I'd say, "Almost." Everything felt different. The routine changed from medicine and pain to colors, lists, and laughter. I realized how powerful hope is, even when things are falling apart. And Leo gave that hope to all of us. This party wasn't just about turning 7. It was about celebrating every single second we had with him. And even though I still had that fear deep down, I pushed it aside just like he did. All that mattered now was making his party unforgettable. When my wife passed away, everything at home felt empty. I didn't know how to manage everything on my own, especially with Leo still so little. That's when I hired Amara. At first, she was just supposed to help around the house, cleaning, organizing things, making sure we had meals ready. But it didn't take long before she became something more. She had this calm way about her. She didn't talk much, but she always knew what to do. One day I walked in and found her sitting on the floor with Leo, feeding him slowly, singing this soft song I didn't recognize. Leo was completely relaxed, eyes half closed, like he felt safe. From that moment on, she started doing more than I ever asked. She was the one who got him to eat on the days he refused to. She sat with him during the rough chemo days when I had to step out. She wasn't just working for us anymore. She was becoming part of us. Amara had this way of connecting with Leo that I couldn't explain. It wasn't forced or awkward, it was just natural. She knew when he needed silence, when he needed distraction, and when he just needed someone to sit beside him without saying a word. I remember walking past his room one night and hearing her telling him a story, something about her own childhood. Her voice was steady and low, and Leo was listening so closely. Later, he started calling her Mommy Number 2. The first time he said it, I thought she might correct him, but she didn't. She just smiled and kept doing whatever she was doing, probably folding his pajamas or fixing his bed. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't make a big deal out of it. That's how she handled everything, quietly, gently. I could see that Leo felt comforted by her in a way that reminded him of his mother, and honestly, I didn't feel jealous. I felt relieved. Over time, I learned more about Amara's life. She once told me about her little sister who got sick when they were kids. There was no money, no doctors nearby, nothing they could do. Her sister passed away, and Amara carried that with her all her life. She never said it like she was looking for sympathy. It came up one day when she was helping Leo take his medicine, and I made a comment about how patient she was. She just nodded and said, "I couldn't help my sister. I can help him." That was the moment I understood why she was so devoted. This wasn't just a job to her. This was something deeply personal, and that made a difference. She didn't clock in and out. She didn't take breaks when she was tired. She stayed because she wanted to. She saw Leo as more than just a sick boy. She saw him as someone she was meant to care for, and she never once hesitated. Leo started depending on her more and more. If he woke up from a nightmare, he asked for her. If he didn't feel like eating, she'd sit beside him with a plate, telling stories or making silly faces until he gave in. He trusted her in a way that went beyond comfort. It was like he believed she could keep him safe. When the treatments got harder and the side effects worse, she was the one who stayed calm. She'd hum softly while rubbing his back when he was throwing up. She knew how to help him breathe slowly when the pain got sharp. Even the doctors noticed how much calmer he was when she was around. I was there too, every step of the way. But Amara brought something I couldn't, a steady, nurturing presence that never wavered. She didn't break down. She didn't show fear. She was the anchor we both needed, especially during the moments when things felt like they were falling apart. As a father, watching someone else become such a key figure in your child's life can be complicated. But with Amara, it wasn't. I never felt like she was replacing Leo's mother. No one could, but I also knew I couldn't do this alone. And Leo wasn't confused. He knew he had one mom who wasn't with us anymore and another woman who loved him like a mom in a different way. I never told him to stop calling her mommy number 2. I didn't need to. It felt right. She earned that title, not through grand gestures, but by showing up every single day, no matter what. And I respected that. More than that, I was grateful. In our darkest moments, she brought light into the house. In the quiet ways she moved through our lives, she gave us stability. I couldn't imagine those years without her. She was always there, the most consistent part of Leo's life. Even as Leo's health got worse, Amara didn't step back. She leaned in even more. She didn't get tired of the routine, didn't complain about long nights or messy days. She stayed focused. Her affection never changed, even when things got hard to watch. She kept brushing his hair, feeding him slowly, holding his hand during hospital visits. She was always calm, always gentle, and Leo never had to ask. She was just there. That kind of care is rare. It wasn't loud or showy, but it was the strongest support in his life. She became the foundation he leaned on when everything else was falling apart. And even when we knew the time was getting short, she never pulled away. That's what made her different. Amara wasn't just part of our story. She was one of the most important parts. And even now, when I look back, I don't remember the machines or the meds first. I remember her, sitting quietly next to him, loving him like he was her own. The day of Leo's birthday party finally arrived, and even though we were in a hospital, it didn't feel like one, not for a few hours at least. The room was full of red and blue decorations, just like he wanted. There were balloons tied to the bed, superhero posters on the walls, and a table with a cake that had both chocolate and strawberry because he couldn't pick one. His friends from school showed up with handmade cards, tiny gift bags, and a lot of energy. Some nurses joined too, clapping, smiling, just trying to keep the mood light. Leo was tired, but he didn't let that stop him. He sat up in bed with his favorite shirt, the red one with the lightning bolt, and opened gifts one by one. He smiled the whole time. Amara stayed close, making sure he was eating, reminding him to sip water, helping him unwrap things when his hands got shaky. For a little while, things felt normal, and Leo was just a kid at a birthday party. Everyone kept things simple and easy for Leo. The kids didn't run around or make too much noise. They played board games at his bedside, shared jokes, and even sang songs. The hospital staff helped organize little games and brought juice boxes and soft snacks for the children. Amara moved around quietly, but always near him. She made sure the blanket stayed over his legs, wiped his hands after cake, and reminded him to rest every so often. He didn't argue. He just leaned into her like he always did. Watching them together, I felt this mix of happiness and pain. Happy that he was surrounded by love, but also aware of why we were all trying so hard to make this one day special. I sat back and let it all happen, trying to stay in the background, taking pictures and recording videos. I wanted to save every second. The whole room was filled with laughter and smiles, but beneath that, I could feel a kind of quiet sadness in the air that nobody mentioned. At one point, when things had calmed down and most of the kids had gone home, Leo looked up at Amara while she was adjusting his pillow and asked, "Am I going to live?" His voice was small, like he wasn't sure if he should even ask it out loud. The room went completely quiet. Even the background music seemed to fade. Amara froze for a second, then she looked right at him and held his hand. She didn't give him a fake answer or promise something she couldn't. She just said, "I'm with you. I'm here, okay?" It wasn't what anyone expected, but it was real. Leo looked at her for a moment and then nodded slowly, like he accepted it. I had just stepped back into the room when I heard it. That question hit me like a truck. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there, heart pounding, trying to process that my little boy was already thinking about life and death in a way no child should have to. After that, the party still continued, but it wasn't the same. People smiled more softly. The laughter came with pauses. The joy was still there, but now it came with this heavy feeling. I saw it on everyone's faces, the nurses, the guests, even the kids. Everyone was reminded of what we were really facing. The birthday hats didn't look as bright, the decorations didn't feel as cheerful. But we kept going, because Leo was still there and he was still smiling. He looked tired but proud, like he had hosted something really special. Amara didn't leave his side, and I saw her wipe her eyes when she thought no one was looking. That question kept ringing in my ears. Am I going to live? It made everything more real. I'd been trying so hard to focus on the good moments, but reality had slipped into the room, right in the middle of the celebration, and it wasn't going away. When everyone had finally gone, the balloons had deflated a little, and the cake was mostly gone. Leo was exhausted. He leaned against Amara, barely keeping his eyes open. She changed him into his pajamas, helped him brush his teeth, and got him settled in bed without saying much. She didn't rush, didn't force anything, just did it all gently, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Then she sat beside him, humming a little tune as she stroked his hair. He was asleep in minutes. I stood in the hallway just watching. I didn't want to interrupt. There was something peaceful about the way she cared for him, something I never wanted to take away. She stayed a while longer, even after he was completely out. She fixed his blanket, turned off the small lamp, and then finally stood up. She didn't say anything to me as she passed by. She just nodded. I nodded back. No words were needed. We both felt the weight of the day. After that party, something changed in the house. Not just the mood, something deeper. The decorations were still up for a few days, but they felt different. They weren't just part of a party anymore. They were a reminder. Leo's question never left me. It sat with me in the kitchen, in the hallway, when I tried to sleep. I could see it on Amara's face too, even though she kept doing everything like always. We didn't talk about it, but we both felt it. Leo didn't bring it up again, but he didn't need to. The way he looked at us had changed a little. He was still the same sweet kid, still laughed at silly cartoons and wanted his favorite juice. But there was something else there too. Something deeper, like he was carrying more than before. And I couldn't protect him from it. That day at the party, in the middle of the cake and gifts, he asked the one question that no one had an answer to, and everything changed. After that day, the party, the question, the silence, Amara started acting a little different. It wasn't anything big or obvious at first, just small things. She was quieter at night, more distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. I'd catch her sitting at the kitchen table after putting Leo to bed, staring at her phone or flipping through her old notebook, writing something down. I thought maybe she was just tired or still shaken by what Leo had asked her. I mean, we all were, but one night around 2 or 3 in the morning, I got up to grab some water and I saw her on the couch with her laptop reading through medical pages. She didn't see me. I stood there for a second watching. Her face was focused, serious. That's when I realized she wasn't just upset. She was searching for something. I didn't ask. I figured if it was important, she'd tell me. But deep down, I knew Amara never did anything without a reason. She was planning something. What I didn't know at the time was that Amara had found something that gave her hope. She had come across an article about partial liver transplants from living donors. It wasn't common, especially between people who aren't related, but it wasn't impossible either. If the blood type and other factors matched, a healthy person could donate part of their liver to someone in need. She kept reading. Study after study, real cases, medical guidelines, everything. And the more she read, the more serious she became. She didn't say a word to me or anyone else. The next morning, without telling us, she went to a small clinic not far from the hospital and asked to be tested for compatibility with Leo. She used her savings to cover the costs. Nobody knew. She didn't want to bring it up unless she was sure. That was Amara. She didn't believe in raising hopes unless she had something solid in her hands. But her mind was made up. She just had to wait. The days that followed, she kept up her routine like nothing had changed. She helped Leo with his food, sang him to sleep, made sure his meds were taken on time. But something in her eyes looked different, like she was holding something big inside. Then, one afternoon, she got the call. I was upstairs with Leo, reading him a story, and she was downstairs folding laundry when her phone rang. She picked it up and listened quietly. She didn't cry or smile, just said, "Thank you," and hung up. Later that night, while we were all asleep, she opened the envelope with the test results. Full compatibility. A perfect match. No one could believe it. Not even the doctor at the clinic. It was rare, extremely rare, for someone unrelated to match like that. But she didn't waste time being shocked. She sat at the table, staring at those papers, already thinking about what to do next. This wasn't a miracle to her. It was a mission, and she was ready to move forward. She thought about the risks, of course. It wasn't a small surgery. A liver donation, even a partial one, came with its own set of dangers. She could face pain, infection, long recovery, but none of that scared her. Not compared to the idea of losing Leo. She had already lost her sister years ago, and it had haunted her ever since. She used to say that if she had just one chance to do something back then, anything, she would have done it. Now, she had that chance. She could give Leo a shot. Maybe not a guaranteed cure, but a chance at more time, more birthdays, more mornings. She sat in the dark, looking at those papers for hours, going over everything in her head. She didn't need permission. She wasn't doing this for thanks or praise. It wasn't about being a hero. It was just about love, about doing what needed to be done, no matter what stood in the way. She made up her mind. She knew Richard might say no. Not because he didn't care, he cared more than anyone, but because he was scared. Scared of risks, scared of getting hopes up, scared of more pain. That's why she decided to keep it all to herself. She folded the test results neatly, placed them inside a book she kept hidden in her bedroom drawer, and never said a word. She continued her days like always, smiling when Leo made jokes, humming while cooking dinner, organizing his meds in the kitchen cabinet. But inside, she was working through every step in her head. Where to go, who to talk to, how to get this done. She even started reading legal documents, looking into donor rights and hospital procedures. She wasn't waiting for approval. She was preparing for action. Every little detail was getting sorted, quietly, secretly. If she had to lie, if she had to sign whatever was needed without Richard knowing, she was ready. She wasn't going to lose another child if there was even a small chance to help. She didn't sleep much during those nights. I noticed, but I thought it was just stress. We were all under pressure. I didn't imagine she was carrying something this big on her own. She never gave me a reason to suspect. She still hugged Leo like nothing had changed, helped him pick which pajamas to wear, and sat with him through the worst parts of the day. But something had shifted in the house, even if no one said it out loud. There was a quiet urgency in her steps, a deeper focus in her eyes. She had made her choice, and she wasn't turning back. I didn't know yet, but she had already decided to fight through doctors, hospitals, and even the law if she had to. All she wanted was to save him. No spotlight, no credit, no applause, just a chance, a single chance. And she was going to do whatever it took, even if it meant going through it alone. Amara went to the hospital early in the morning. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not even me. She just said she had an errand and left with her folder tucked under her arm. Inside were all the tests, blood work, compatibility results, everything. She had organized it neatly, with notes and highlights. When she got to the hospital, she went straight to the transplant department. She waited until someone could see her and then calmly explained the situation. She said she wanted to donate part of her liver to Leo. The doctor looked surprised, maybe even confused at first. He asked if she was family, and she said no, not by blood. But she explained how long she had cared for Leo, how much she loved him, and that she was fully compatible. The doctor glanced at the papers, looked back at her, and slowly shook his head. He explained that the rules didn't allow organ donations from unrelated people without going through a long approval process. She wasn't expecting that. She stayed calm at first, trying to explain that this wasn't just a random decision. She wasn't doing it because she was pressured or confused. She told them about Leo, how she had raised him since he was a toddler, how she was there through every treatment, every hospital stay, every bad day. She told them this was her choice, that she knew the risks, had already done her research, and was more than willing to sign anything they needed. But the hospital staff kept repeating the same thing: policies, laws, restrictions. They weren't questioning her heart, just the rules. She asked to speak to someone else, someone higher up, and they let her talk to a director. But it was the same conversation all over again. No legal connection, no biological link, no way to approve it. By the time she left the hospital, she was angry, heartbroken, and exhausted. She had walked in with hope and walked out with nothing but frustration. That's when she knew she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. That night after dinner, when Leo was asleep, Amara called me into the kitchen. She looked tired. Her voice was low. She sat me down and told me everything, how she had done the compatibility tests, how she kept it secret because she knew I might say no, and how she had tried to get the doctors to approve the donation. At first, I didn't understand. I just stared at her, trying to catch up. And then it hit me, what she was actually offering to do. She wanted to give up a part of herself to save my son. I didn't know what to say. My first reaction wasn't gratitude, it was fear. I told her she couldn't do that it it was too risky, that it wasn't her responsibility. I told her Leo didn't need a second parent making dangerous choices. My voice got louder, and I asked her to never bring it up again. I didn't mean to hurt her, but I did. She didn't argue. She just nodded quietly and walked away. After our talk, I thought she would let it go. I figured maybe I had made my point, that maybe I had scared her enough to stop. But I should have known better. That's not who Amara is. The next few days, she barely mentioned anything. She acted normal, took care of Leo, cleaned the kitchen, helped with meals, but I could see something was off. At night, she stayed up even later, always with her laptop. I didn't know what she was doing, but part of me guessed. She wasn't giving up. She was looking for a different way. One night, I walked past the living room and saw her messaging someone in another language. She had a notebook full of handwritten names and addresses. She was researching clinics outside the country, trying to find someone who would take the case. Someone who didn't care about outdated rules or legal boxes. Someone who could see what she saw, a chance to save Leo. I didn't ask questions. I knew she wouldn't stop. She found something, an international clinic, a place that had handled rare cases before. It wasn't some shady operation. It was real, with real doctors, real success stories. The clinic had handled other complicated transplant cases, even ones where the donor wasn't related. Amara gathered all her documents, test results, health history, personal statement, and sent everything in one long email. She didn't tell me she was doing it. She didn't ask for permission. She just did it. The next day, she got a response. A doctor from the clinic had read everything. He said he understood her situation better than most. He had lost his own daughter years ago because a donor couldn't be found in time. That stuck with him. He said he'd take the case. Not only that, he promised to handle everything quietly, under the radar if needed. He didn't care about rules that got in the way of saving a child. He just wanted to help. Amara sat with that message for a while, holding her phone, quietly crying. That message changed everything. Amara knew this was her shot. The doctor said they'd need to do some evaluations, more testing, and go through a few more steps. But the important thing was, he was willing. He was in. That was all she needed to keep going. She printed out his message, filed it with her other documents, and started preparing. She didn't know how she'd tell me or when, but she knew she wasn't going to stop. Not now. She had a plan, a doctor who believed in her, and a real chance. I still didn't know any of it yet. I was still sitting in my own fear, thinking I had shut the door for good. But Amara wasn't living in fear. She was living in hope. She wasn't waiting around for approval anymore. She had already made her choice the day she got those test results. And now, with this doctor on her side, she was ready to do whatever it took, even if she had to carry the whole thing on her own. While Richard was away on a work trip, Amara moved quietly. She had been preparing everything for days without telling anyone. She kept her routine the same, cooking meals, caring for Leo, organizing the house so nothing would seem off. But at night, she packed a small suitcase with just the essentials. She didn't want to draw attention. She told Leo they were going for a special private consultation to check on his health. He didn't question it. He trusted her completely. A nurse who had worked with our family for years, someone Amara deeply trusted, had agreed to help with the transport. They didn't use an ambulance or anything that might cause suspicion. Just a private car, quiet and fast. Leo was excited about the trip, thinking it was something fun, something different from the regular hospital visits. Amara smiled and played along, but inside, she was nervous. This was it. No turning back now. She was walking into the unknown, all for the chance to save him. When they arrived at the international hospital, everything had been arranged. The doctor who had accepted the case was already waiting for them. The staff welcomed them calmly and without too many questions. Everything was confidential, just like he promised. No media, no unnecessary attention, no paperwork delays, just action. They were quickly brought into a private wing of the hospital, and the first round of evaluations started right away. Both Amara and Leo went through more scans, blood work, and checkups. The medical team wanted to confirm everything was still okay for the transplant. Hours passed, and though they were both tired, Amara stayed focused. She checked on Leo constantly, making sure he wasn't scared, telling him stories and holding his hand whenever the nurses drew blood. She kept her own fear hidden. After the tests were done, the doctors confirmed the surgery would happen the next morning. The room was quiet after that. It was no longer a plan. It was real. Everything was ready. The hardest part would start next. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay on the small couch next to Leo's hospital bed, listening to him breathe while her mind raced. The lights were dim, and the hallway outside was silent. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about what might happen in the morning. What if something went wrong? What if she didn't make it? She never told anyone this, but she wasn't afraid of dying. What scared her most was not being there for Leo afterward, if she failed him. Around midnight, she got up and found a pen and paper in the drawer by the bed. She sat down quietly and wrote a note. It was short, only a few lines. She folded it neatly and placed it in Leo's hand, knowing he'd find it later. It said, "If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes." After writing it, she kissed his forehead, tucked him in, and lay back down, holding her own tears in until sleep finally came. That night felt endless. Morning came fast. Nurses entered the room early to begin pre-surgery prep. Leo was still half asleep, but cooperative. He had no idea what was really happening. He thought it was just another exam day. Amara smiled and helped him get ready, brushing his hair and adjusting the little socks he liked. She held his hand as they wheeled him down the hall. At a certain point, they reached a split, one hallway for Leo's surgery room, the other for hers. She leaned down, kissed his cheek and said, "I'll see you soon, baby." Then she watched him disappear around the corner. Her turn came next. Nurses guided her into the pre-op room, where doctors were already waiting. Everything moved fast. IV lines, final questions, quiet voices, beeping machines. She didn't say much. She had already said what mattered in her note. Now, it was all up to the doctors. As the anesthesia kicked in and her eyes slowly closed, all she could think about was Leo. Her last thought was a prayer for him to be okay. While the doctors were operating, everything outside the hospital stayed calm, except one phone call that changed everything. The hospital contacted Richard. He had just landed in another country for meetings when his phone rang. He answered casually, but as soon as he heard what was going on, everything froze. They told him Leo was in surgery. Amara had brought him in. A liver transplant. She was the donor. At first, he thought it was a mistake. He asked them to repeat it 3 times, but it was real. He hung up without saying a word, rushed to the airport and bought the first ticket back. He didn't pack, didn't call anyone else. He just boarded and sat there, staring at the seat in front of him. His mind was spinning. What would he find when he arrived? Would Amara be okay? Would Leo survive? Why hadn't she told him? Fear mixed with guilt and confusion. The flight felt endless. All he wanted was to land and see his son, and her. He needed to see both. Back at the hospital, the surgeries were still underway. Both teams were working carefully, following the plan. The doctor who had lost his daughter years ago was leading the operation. For him, this was personal. He moved with purpose, double-checking every step, making sure nothing was missed. Leo's body was fragile, but the team was prepared. Amara's procedure was going well too. Her liver segment was healthy, strong, and perfect for transplant. No major complications so far. The staff kept communication limited, as planned. It was a quiet floor, no interruptions, no panic, just focused work. In the waiting area, a trusted nurse from earlier sat with Amara's phone, waiting for updates, ready to let Richard know as soon as he landed. Everything now depended on the next few hours. Everyone in that hospital knew the risks, but they also knew the purpose behind it. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was about giving a child more time. As the surgeries continued, the note stayed in Leo's hand, small, folded, and filled with the kind of love no rule could ever block. When I arrived at the hospital, my hands were shaking. I didn't even stop to ask for directions. I rushed straight to the ICU floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I didn't know what I was going to walk into. All I knew was that my son and Amara were both in surgery just hours ago, and I had no idea how things had turned out. When I reached the ICU, I saw a nurse who recognized me and walked me down the hall without saying much. We stopped in front of a glass door, and there he was, Leo. He was hooked up to machines, wires everywhere, but he was breathing. He was alive. I stood frozen for a moment. Then the nurse gently pointed to the next room, and I saw Amara. She was there too, pale and still, in a medically induced coma but stable. Both of them had made it through. I couldn't believe it. I leaned against the wall and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Doctors came in shortly after and explained everything. The transplant had gone smoothly. Leo's body had accepted the new liver without signs of rejection so far. That was the best news I'd heard in a long time. Amara, they said, was still sedated because her surgery had been more complex and her recovery would take longer. But she was stable. That word, stable, felt like a miracle. I stayed in Leo's room for hours. I held his hand, watched him sleep, and kept thinking about how close I had come to losing him. Then I went to Amara's room. It was hard to look at her like that, so quiet, so still. There was a folded note on the nightstand. I opened it and read her words. "If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes." I couldn't hold it together. I sat in the chair next to her and just cried. I whispered, "Thank you," over and over, not knowing if she could hear me, but hoping somehow she could. 3 days later, Leo woke up. I was sitting beside him, holding his hand like always, when his eyes slowly opened. He looked around, confused for a second, then smiled and said, "Can I have cake?" I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It was the first real laugh I had in weeks. I told him we'd get him cake as soon as the doctor said it was okay. Then he looked at me more seriously and asked, "Where's Mommy number 2? I paused. I didn't want to scare him, so I told him the truth, but gently. I said she was resting because she had to go through something big to help him. He nodded and closed his eyes again like he understood. Every time he woke up after that, the first thing he asked was how she was. It became a routine. Wake up, ask for Amara, listen quietly to the update. He didn't complain, didn't fuss. He just wanted to know she was okay. The nurses and staff started hearing what had happened. The story spread quickly. Everyone knew Amara had donated part of her liver to save Leo. It touched people. Some came by just to see if the boy from the transplant story was really doing okay. One nurse brought him a stuffed bear. Another brought balloons. Even doctors who weren't involved in the surgery stopped in to check on him. The energy in the ICU started to shift. It didn't feel so heavy anymore. People were smiling a little more. There was hope in the air. One evening, a nurse told me she hadn't seen something this meaningful in her whole career. I sat with that for a while. Amara had changed more than just Leo's life. She'd changed the atmosphere around all of us. I kept going between both rooms every day. I didn't want either of them to be alone. Leo needed to see a familiar face when he opened his eyes, and I needed to see Amara breathing, even if she wasn't awake yet. Leo's recovery picked up quickly. He started sitting up in bed, asking for specific meals, and even watching cartoons. His voice got stronger, his color improved, and he was getting back to being a kid. The doctors were happy with his progress, but he didn't seem fully relaxed until he had news about Amara. Every morning he would say, "Did she wake up yet?" and every time I had to say no, he'd nod quietly and look out the window like he was trying to send her a message with his thoughts. Sometimes he'd ask to draw something for her. We taped his little pictures to the wall in her room, hoping she'd see them when she woke up. I saw how much he loved her, how deep their bond was. It was more than just care. She was part of him. He didn't even need to talk about it. You could feel it in how he waited for her, how he believed in her waking up without even asking when, just believing. The mood in the hospital was different now. It felt lighter. The fear that used to sit in my chest every minute wasn't as sharp anymore. I still had worries. Amara hadn't opened her eyes yet, but I also had something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Leo smiled more. He talked more. He laughed again. Every day I sat between the two rooms, his and hers, just going back and forth, being there. I read to Leo, and then I'd go and sit with Amara, sometimes reading the same stories out loud, just in case she could hear. Sometimes I'd play recordings of Leo's voice. I wanted her to know he was okay. She had done something no one else could have done. She gave him a second chance. And while she was still unconscious, she was still very present in everything around us. Her note stayed folded in my pocket. I read it every now and then, and every time, it hit me all over again. Mommy said yes, and because she did, everything changed. 5 days after the surgery, something incredible happened. I was sitting in Amara's room like I had done every day since the operation. I was used to the quiet, the beeping of machines, the nurses coming in and out, the stillness of her face. But that morning, everything changed. I had just stepped out to get a coffee when a nurse ran into the hallway and called me back, smiling. I rushed in and saw her, Amara, awake. Her eyes were open, and she was looking around the room, confused but alert. And right next to her, sitting in a chair, was Leo. He had snuck in earlier without anyone noticing. He was smiling at her like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. When she saw him, she stared for a few seconds, and then he said, "Mommy number 2, I'm alive." Just like that, those exact words. Amara started crying. No holding back. She reached out, touched his face, and cried like she had been holding it in forever. The nurses in the room stopped moving. Everyone was frozen, watching the moment like it was something sacred. Amara couldn't speak at first. She just held his hand and cried, while Leo kept smiling, like everything had finally fallen into place. I was standing near the door, completely still, just trying to take it all in. After a few minutes, the doctors stepped in. They gave Amara some water, checked her vitals, and let her know she was okay. Then they turned to us with another surprise. They had the results from Leo's latest tests. The new liver had finally allowed the treatments to work. His body was responding better than they expected. The cancer was in remission. Hearing that word felt unreal. I looked at Amara and saw a different kind of cry take over. This one was from relief. She had done the impossible. Not just surviving the transplant, but giving Leo a real chance. A chance we had lost hope in. Even the doctors looked amazed. One of the doctors, who had been with us since the start of this journey, said it was rare to see such a quick turnaround. He admitted they were surprised. Leo's blood work, scans, and everything else showed major improvement. It wasn't just about the transplant. It was how his body was now accepting the medication, how everything was working in sync for the first time in months. They told us he'd still need checkups and close monitoring, but his progress was way ahead of schedule. Leo kept asking when he could leave the hospital and eat real cake. Amara laughed through her tears and told him, "Soon." I sat beside her and thanked her again, this time looking her in the eyes. She tried to brush it off, saying, "He's alive. That's enough." But I needed to say it. I told her she gave us a future, not just a few more days, but real time. She didn't reply with words. She just squeezed my hand, and that was enough. She understood. Words started to get out. We didn't say anything to the press, but someone at the hospital must have talked, because by the end of the week, the story was everywhere. News outlets started covering it. Woman donates. Liver to boy she raised. Saves his life. It was on TV, online, even on the radio. Reporters wanted interviews. Cameras started showing up at the hospital entrance. People argued online about whether it should have been allowed from the start. Some said it was a miracle. Others asked why the system almost stood in the way. A few days later, we heard that a director from the original hospital, the one who denied Amara's donation in the first place, had been removed. Some hospitals even started reviewing their rules. What Amara did started something bigger. Her choice, her bravery, her sacrifice. It made people think. It made institutions rethink. But while the world was talking, Amara kept quiet. She didn't want attention. She didn't even want to hear about the news. She just wanted to focus on Leo. Interview requests came flooding in. Journalists emailed, called, even showed up at the hospital trying to speak to her. Some wanted to give her awards. A few organizations offered to name something after her. She refused everything, every single offer. She said the same thing every time. I didn't do it for that, and I believed her, believed. She didn't care about headlines or recognition. All she wanted was to see Leo healthy, smiling, and walking again. That's what she fought for. That's what mattered. She stayed close to him through every physical therapy session, every blood test, every tiny step of recovery. If he had a headache, she was there. If he got tired or frustrated, she was the one who calmed him down. She celebrated his small wins like they were gold medals. Her focus never shifted. Even with the world watching, her eyes were only on him. And every time he smiled, she smiled too. Quietly, like it was their secret. The mood in the hospital was different now. People were lighter. Nurses who used to come in with tired eyes now came in with warm energy. Doctors made extra rounds just to peek in and see how Leo and Amara were doing. Visitors left cards and stuffed animals. Leo loved it all, but he was still most excited about walking into Amara's room and saying, "Look what I did today," and she'd cheer like he'd won the lottery. I spent my days going between them, watching everything slowly shift from fear to peace, from sickness to healing. We weren't out of the woods yet. There would still be challenges, but for the first time, we had real hope, the kind that sticks. And through it all, Amara stayed grounded. No matter how much noise the world made outside, she kept showing up the same way, steady, loving, and focused. She didn't want the spotlight. She just wanted what she always did, to protect Leo. And now, with him healing day by day, she had finally done exactly that. 1 year later, we threw another birthday party for Leo. This time he was turning 7, and this time things felt completely different. The house wasn't quiet and heavy like it had been the year before. It was loud, colorful, full of laughter and noise. Balloons were everywhere. The yard was filled with kids from school, neighbors, and even some of the nurses who had helped us during the hard times. Leo ran around, full of energy, his hair thick and growing back, his cheeks round again. He looked like any other kid now, happy, healthy, and full of life. We had music, games, and a cake, twice the size of the one from last year. Watching him laugh with his friends, chasing bubbles and eating way too many sweets, felt unreal in the best way. After everything we'd been through, this didn't just feel like a birthday, it felt like a miracle. And Amara, she was there, of course, moving quietly in the background, just like always, making sure everything was perfect. Amara handled the food, checked the decorations, and reminded me about the candles I almost forgot. She didn't want any attention, but everyone noticed her anyway. People knew the story by now. Most had heard whispers about what she had done for Leo, but she never talked about it. She stayed focused on what needed to be done, At one point, I saw her helping a little girl fix her shoelace and then rushing back inside to check the oven timer. She never stopped moving, but even though she kept to the background, I could see how proud she was. Leo kept calling her over to show her things. "Mommy number 2, look at this," he yelled while holding up a drawing a friend made for him. She smiled, came over, and gave him a gentle hug. I stood there watching, holding my phone, recording as much as I could. Not just for memories, but because I knew how much this moment meant. I didn't want to forget a second of it. As the party went on, Leo pulled Amara aside and sat with her on the porch steps. I watched from a distance, pretending to check the grill so I didn't interrupt. He looked at her seriously and asked, "So, will I actually live now?" He wasn't scared when he said it. He was just trying to understand, like any kid would. Amara looked at him and nodded with the calmest smile. "Yes, you will," she said. "You're going to live and grow up and do everything you want." That was all he needed. He hugged her hard and ran off to play again like nothing happened. But I saw the way she sat still for a moment after he left. That one question carried so much weight. And her answer, simple, true, was something we'd been hoping to say for a long time. For months, we had lived day by day. Now, for the first time, the future didn't feel like a maybe. It felt real. After everyone left, the house was a mess, wrapping paper on the floor, plastic cups everywhere, music still playing faintly from a speaker someone forgot to turn off. But the mood? It was light. The kind of light I hadn't felt in years. I sat on the couch with Leo, who had finally crashed after all the excitement, and looked around the living room. On the wall above the TV, we had framed Amara's note, the one she wrote before her surgery. "If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes." It sat there quietly, like a reminder of what love really looks like. I still remembered reading it the first time, not knowing if she'd make it. Now, a year later, she was in the kitchen packing up leftovers, while Leo slept with frosting on his shirt and candy in his pockets. The contrast was unbelievable. We had gone from near silence in this house to full-blown life, and none of it would have happened without her. None of it. I had changed too. A year ago, I was barely holding myself together. I was buried in work, scared of the future, always trying to control everything. But now, I found myself enjoying things again. I spent more time with Leo. We cooked together, played silly games, watched movies on the floor. Amara became a constant presence, not just in the house, but in our lives. We talked more, laughed more, and supported each other like a real team. Our relationship grew stronger without us even planning it. It just happened naturally, day by day. She still didn't like praise or attention, but I made sure she knew how much she mattered, how much we needed her, not just for what she did, but for who she was. The house didn't just look different. It felt different, warmer, more alive. Leo brought that energy, but Amara held it together. She was the steady force behind it all, never asking for anything in return, just happy to see Leo growing up. We didn't talk about the transplant often, not because we were avoiding it, but because Amara didn't like turning it into something dramatic. To her, it was simple. She did what she had to do, and now that Leo was healthy, that was enough for her. She stayed out of the spotlight, turned down every interview, and never bragged about what she did. But I saw the way she watched him, how she paid attention to every small detail in his recovery, every inch of progress. She noticed things I didn't. If he looked tired, she adjusted his schedule. If he got overwhelmed, she stepped in before anyone else. Her focus was always on him, not herself. And honestly, that's what made her incredible. She didn't need applause. She didn't want to be known. All she wanted was for Leo to live. And now, watching him blow out the candles on his cake, laughing with his friends, full of life, I knew she had gotten exactly what she wanted. And so had we. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.